There's a lot of talk about how Gen AI is going to take people's jobs away. To some degree, that'll happen, although I think it's going to be more about Gen AI-based products will take the mundane work out of what people are doing, and people are going to be able to do more. But equally, I think it's going to make services available to people who couldn't afford or there were just not enough people to provide them.
Hi, I'm Boaz, founder and CEO of Augmented AI, and I'm excited that you are tuning in to the Shift AI podcast, a show that explores what it takes to thrive and adapt to the changing workplace in the digital age of remote work and AI. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Yuval Neeman and Amy McCullough as our guests. Yuval and Amy are the managing directors at Trilogy Equity Partners and invest in early-stage companies with an emphasis on founders and a human-centric approach. If you're someone interested in early-stage venture investing in the Seattle startup ecosystem, you are not going to want to miss this episode. We also want to send out a special thank you to Augmented AI for sponsoring this episode. This is going to be a great show, and we are super excited to talk to Yuval and Amy today, and we can't wait to learn more from them. Let's get to it. All right, Yuval and Amy, I am really excited to have you guys on the Shift AI podcast today. Welcome.
Thanks, Boaz. We're happy to be here.
Thanks, Boaz.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you know, the audience knows, I like to start and introduce you guys. You guys are managing directors at Trilogy, and I want you guys each to talk a little bit about your backgrounds, what got you to become VCs, how you made that journey to be venture capitalists, and then we're going to dive in today and talk a lot about what you're seeing out there that not a lot of other people are seeing about Gen AI, future of work, some of the portfolio companies. So I'm really excited to get into it. But first, Yuval, maybe you can start and just give us a little bit of background. How did you get to Trilogy?
Indirectly, after 16 years at Microsoft, I kind of felt like it was time for a change. And I didn't know what I was going to do, maybe retire. I was kind of dabbling with startups here in Seattle and in Israel, where I'm originally from. And two things happened. One of those startups, the Israeli startups, we ended up raising money from Trilogy. I didn't know any of those folks, and I kind of liked them, and they were intriguing. And they were like, "Well, we have the space. You can come sit with us," and so forth. And also, my daughter, who was then I think 13, she said, "Dad, you've been at home long enough. Maybe it's time you get another job." So it was a combination of my daughter's comment and really enjoying the folks at Trilogy, and that's what got me into it. When I left Microsoft, I didn't think that I was going to go be an investor and a VC, but it's been a fantastic second career.
Now, Amy, I know you were also at Microsoft in a previous life. What was your path? I mean, you've taken a couple other twists and turns on your way to Trilogy, so tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm a Washington native, born and raised in the state. Grew up and went to the University of Washington, where I was a finance major. And I ended up interning at Microsoft during school, which was a really eye-opening experience in terms of just exposure to, one of these just revered tech companies. In a finance capacity, I took a role there after college in the Treasury Department, the portfolio management group, and had a little bit of an epiphany around the idea that I could have worked at Microsoft for a very long time and kind of stayed there and had a really stable career, I'm sure, but also had a desire to have a different kind of experience. And so I took a role at JP Morgan in New York in the investment bank in equity research. And it was a role covering small and mid-cap technology stocks on a team of 3 or 4 folks. That role was really eye-opening. These are companies that were just recently public. So kind of, late stage relative to where we are, but still at a really exciting time in their development. And after a few years there, I had a thought around, gosh, I'm spending a lot of my energy telling our clients where to invest, but I wanted to be on that side of the table. And so kind of serendipitously through a colleague, I knew that Trilogy was starting to be formed. And it was an opportunity to come back to Seattle, where I'm from, and try something, that felt really entrepreneurial and small and exciting. So that's how I ended up here back in 2007.
Yeah. And, kind of going backwards to your time growing up in Washington, was your family entrepreneurial or into finance, or was business talked about in the family. How did you get excited about numbers and finance and going down this path?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, no is the short answer. My parents both immigrated to the United States from Korea in their 20s. And my father went to graduate school at Washington State University, where I was born, and was a poultry scientist. So, genetics for chickens, basically. And my mother was a registered nurse for probably 45 plus years. And so they were, I think entrepreneurial definitionally in terms of building a new life for themselves and their family here. And the conversations around the dinner table were more, I would say, prototypical first generation, a lot of focus on academics, a lot of focus on doing the fact that you could kind of do anything, that this country was about being able to accomplish and do anything with hard work. And I think, if anything, my parents really instilled that in me in the context of just a lot of grit and a lot of perseverance, which I'm super grateful for. So.
Yeah. Well, I always ask this question. I'm going to ask Yuval the same question too, but I like this question because it gives people a little window into kind of who you are. And so what was the first job? I mean, you worked for Microsoft, you worked for JP Morgan, but what was your first job where someone actually gave you money?
My first
in
job,
exchange?
my first job was bagging groceries at the local Safeway in Puyallup. And I'll tell you, I went to Annie Wright School, which is a private school in Tacoma, on scholarship. And I was probably the only girl in my class who was working, maybe the only girl in my high school who was working outside of school. But the eye-opening experience with that was, it was a union job. I started bagging groceries, and then I started loading dairy coolers on Friday and Saturday nights with guys who had been, just weathered and working in grocery stores their whole career. And man, what a humanistic people experience that was at 16, right? And terrific in terms of like all kinds of exposure to all kinds of people, super hard labor work, and also a sense of developing, I think, work ethic in something outside of school and something outside of kind of achievement oriented, but really eye-opening in terms of working with all kinds of people.
Yeah, interesting perspective. All right, Yuval, it's your turn. I mean, your background is a little bit different. You're from Israel.
Yeah.
Did you grow up on a kibbutz?
I grew up in a kibbutz. So
Yeah. What was your first job?
well, in the kibbutz, you work from grade school on, and every year it's a few more hours. And so you work during the week. And then in the summer, you work most of it. So as a teenager, I was picking avocados, rain or shine. And so speaking about grit, it could be 100 degrees or it could be pouring rain, and just picking avocados. And by the way, you're not getting paid. I think that the other thing about kind of growing up, so the kibbutz was a small community, about 500 people. Everybody knows everyone, mostly focused on agriculture at the time. It's since shifted. But my parents were kind of outliers. My father was an engineer and a professor and forged his own path. And my mother was also a teacher, and she was teaching movement and drama and dance for school teachers. And because of their career, we moved around. I spent some years growing up in London, and then all other places around the world. So it was both kind of a mix of very small, tight-knit community and just working physically, and all this creative stuff that my parents were doing. Like my mother was the first one to bring Tai Chi to Israel like 50 years ago. I don't know however long.
Wow.
So, but my first actual paying job was when I started going to engineering school at Technion. My parents had left the kibbutz by then, and my father had a business. He was kind of a consultant and stuff, and I was basically doing the bookkeeping for him, and he paid for my tuition, which wasn't much. But so that
was the exchange. Yeah, I love it.
What was the exchange? Bartering.
Yeah. Before we go further with the interview, I want to take a moment to tell you about one of our podcast sponsors, Augmented AI, and how they are transforming businesses with Gen AI solutions. Augmented AI specializes in helping organizations uncover and address internal workflow challenges that Gen AI can solve. Their comprehensive process starts by identifying and prioritizing business problems, and then assessing each based on value, effort, and risk. Once a problem is selected, the Augmented AI team tests and validates the solution to ensure that it works. Only after this thorough validation do they draft technical requirements, which serve as a blueprint for building and deploying the solutions. The real beauty of partnering with augmented AI is that they don't just stop at strategy and feasibility studies. They actually stand up the solutions and manage them for you so you can focus on what you do best. If you're interested in experiencing this innovative approach to deploying Gen AI solutions, visit simplyaugmented.ai and click on the Learn More button. That's simplyaugmented.ai. Now back to the episode. I really want to get into what you guys are both doing at Trilogy because I've known you guys for a long time and I've been following the companies that you've been investing in. This last 18 months, though, I'm sure has been interesting in terms of who you guys are seeing and talking to. But first, maybe Yuval, can you talk a little bit about Trilogy's thesis and just where you guys are coming from as an organization, how you think about investing? And then maybe we'll shift over to you after that, Amy, and talk about some of the portfolio companies and what you guys are seeing out there.
I think in an interesting way, we formed a strong thesis about a dozen years ago, around 2012, which was about focusing on seed stage. We saw seed rounds going from quarter to 500,000 to 2, 3, 4, 5 million, and there wasn't really anyone focusing and able to write checks for that in Seattle at the time. And we decided that would be a focus. We also really believed in rolling our sleeves and having our operational experience working with the entrepreneurs, rolling our sleeves. And so it was about investing locally. And with the narrowing of the stage and the geography, we expanded from mostly being B2B to doing B2C as well. And the thesis was simple, deceptively simple. We're looking for exceptional entrepreneurs because this journey is super hard. And you have to be exceptional to be able to be successful. And these exceptional entrepreneurs would have we have trying to solve a really big problem in a unique way. And we never thought that we could decide, oh my God, VR is going to be the next big thing. We'd let the entrepreneurs do that bit. Otherwise, we would be maybe entrepreneurs if we were crazy enough. And that actually holds to today, like even the craziness and the huge change with seen with Gen AI, I think that thesis actually holds with, a little bit of fine tuning around Gen AI, but I'll let Amy take it from here.
Yeah, let's hear it from you, Amy.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, the ability to partner with folks at that really early stage, and, I'd say like underscore partner capitalized P, right? I think if you talk to our companies, I think that's one of the things that we love most about the work that we're doing is that there is a really amazing working relationship you develop with your entrepreneurs over the course of that journey. And as the earliest stage investor, typically writing that check, you get to be a part of that action from kind of day one. And that's a really special bond that you build with your entrepreneurs, right? And some of them, I think they go on to raise significant amounts of money from all kinds of investors. I'd like to think that we're a little bit of, home base for them foundationally, which is just a super privileged and special place to be. And over that time, we've done, as you've all mentioned, mostly kind of pre-seed or seed deals. I mean, deals where it's like people that we have known and have been excited to work with, and it's a plan on paper, and we're giving them a little bit of money and we're getting started, to folks that we just meet, right, who are in kind of speed dating mode and developing a relationship really quickly to try to get to an answer, right, yes or no on an investment. So over that time, Yuval, Chuck Stonecipher, our other managing director partner, and myself and our team of 3 or 4 other folks, in addition to our broader partnership. I mean, that's the work, and I put work in kind of quotes, right? Because it really is, it's a lot of fun. It's a privilege. You learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about yourself in this business over that period of time. So,
yeah, it's really interesting. And I think it's a really challenging job to be able to pick the winners like you guys do. And I wonder about that, when I think about how you guys try to figure out who are the entrepreneurs that are going to eventually IPO. And I'm sure you're not always kind of thinking about that, but you want big ideas and big opportunities. And I think it's challenging to kind of pick the winners. And so how do you guys think about a framework for being able to do that, especially in hype cycles like this AI hype cycle that we're in now? And there's previous ones too, that I'm sure you guys have ridden that wave. Is there a framework that you guys think about in terms of how to assess these founders?
So I think, as you mentioned, we've seen these waves before. Now this wave is kind of happening at a faster pace. Just as an example, cloud and mobile, kind of started around the same time, like 2008, 2010-ish. And it was clear to us that this was going to have an impact and will change, what most companies do. And so we started focusing on that. One very fortunate example of that was Remitly. So it was, again, fantastic entrepreneurs tackling a big problem, bringing this new set of platforms, mobile and cloud, to bear to substantially reduce costs and enhance the service, blah, 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 all of those things. That was an example. I think what we're seeing now is a little bit both more exciting and more challenging because it's moving so fast. This is probably the fourth or fifth wave I'm seeing. Was the PC wave, was the internet wave, was mobile, was cloud. None of them moved as fast as this. And so one of the things that I think served us well is just having a little bit of caution and understanding that what seemed like a fantastic idea a year ago now seems like table stakes, and it's like commodity. And I think from a fairly early part of this wave, we started forming a thesis, which was we're looking for companies who are either using Gen AI to create new products and solutions that were not possible before in addressing big opportunities, and I can talk about a couple of examples, or companies that are using it to supercharge and do something way, way better than it was done before. And by the way, also companies who are not using Gen AI, like one of our latest examples is a company that's doing infrastructure, a company called Zuplo, doing, fantastic kind of modern day at the edge API gateway, and is not based on Gen AI. They'll probably end up finding ways to have Gen AI incorporate and improve their products. Maybe they'll have features that help companies who are using Gen AI, but it's not their core. So it also wasn't like we're just doing Gen AI. We go back to like great entrepreneurs solving a big problem in a really smart way.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. That really does. Amy, can you talk a little bit about some of the deals that you're seeing, some that you've invested in, portfolio companies that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I mean, we have two that I can talk about out of our second fund that we've invested in over the last. These two companies are about, I would say a year to a year and a half old-ish. One is called Alongside, and one is called Bright Canary. Both are targeting. They're targeting either youth in the context of Alongside and kind of mental health for tweens, teens. They're selling into school districts, clinically backed research powered by AI to basically allow for 24/7 mental health support for students at like a tier 1 level. So let's call it, they're not focused necessarily on kind of a much higher level of support. They're focused on helping as many kids as possible who, 90% of them who might need a mental health support person never get to see them, right? And so what is technology allowing them to do, and that kind of impact that they're able to have is tremendous scale and impact in real time with technology that never gets tired, never doesn't want to listen, never isn't available, right? And school counselors and teachers are just not equipped to be able to deal with that, right? And so what they're seeing with thousands of students across the country and the districts that they're serving is not only are they able to use clinically backed, tactics and chat and means to access them, but they're able to harness the power of Gen AI to be able to infuse, natural conversation, understanding of the context of a situation, and provide that engagement that's, really critical for these kids to feel comfortable and, in a trusted capacity. I think as we think about how the scope of that kind of problem, right? Mental health problems among young people are one of the leading causes of truancy, grade degradation, behavioral issues, and other things in schools, right? So if you can't get past that, the business of teaching and learning can't happen, right? And so, that's one where it's like, wow, the scale and scope of that business and what they can do with technology to support schools and is just wasn't possible, right? Before Gen AI. And so, I think we think about those businesses as, and I would say it's kind of not an explicit part of the thesis, but it's a great benefit, are companies which have the potential to be really significant businesses coupled with huge societal impact, right? Huge positive societal impact. Alongside clearly one of those, Owlet Baby Care, which is in our first portfolio, is one of those as well, tracking, infant health monitoring. And then Bright Canary, which is another one, local company that we backed. These are repeat entrepreneurs of ours. They were in our first portfolio as well, and a B2B company.
Oh, nice.
Which is a nice kind of bringing it full circle. Carl Stillner and Steve Dosick are the entrepreneurs there. They built an app, which is available in the App Store. So everybody should go download that after this podcast.
Check it out. Bright Canary.
But Bright Canary is focused on empowering parents to understand what their kids are doing online on their devices.
Oh, that's not a big problem at all.
Yeah, no, I know. Nobody's worried about that. Least of all me. No, and they do that in a really interesting, thoughtful way. So it's on a variety of platforms, but recently they've launched a support of iMessage. And so you are able to understand what your kids are doing in these, micro social networks, in these group chats and iMessage, both positive and concerning, right? As we all know, as kids get older, they're less likely to tell their parents kind of everything that's going on, and whether they're interested in submarines or whether they're interested in something maybe that we would be worried that they're interested in, right? And so Bright Canary is using LLMs to train their data around harmful or explicit content, inference around things that might be quite nuanced, conversations that might indicate some level of bullying, but really require some contextual understanding of that. That's super powerful for a parent to get that feedback, to understand something might be happening. Something is maybe going on with your kid that you should know about, right? And so their thesis, unlike, competitors in that space who approach it with kind of a walled garden approach, right? Like lock it down, lock the router down, can't access it, right? Their approach is, the reality is your kids are going to access and be able to figure out how to access all kinds of content, material, engagement, etc. You as a parent want to be equipped to both know about that so you can have a conversation with them and be able to have that dialogue, right? And that transparency and information is super powerful. We view that also as a company where, wow, it's solving a huge pain point for parents and kids, which also, by the way, unchecked, often leads to other problems for the kid in all kinds of ways, right? And so that's another one where, this concept of contextual understanding, historical knowledge, the full gamut of, the vocabulary and vernacular of teenagers and what those signals mean, the power of Gen AI to digest that and be able to synthesize that real time, all the time, is really powerful.
Yeah, I love those two examples. And it's one of those things that if you took Gen AI out of the equation, they would still be massively powerful problems, and big problems to solve. And one of the things that we're seeing out there in the world as we help businesses try to figure out where Gen AI fits into their workflows is that I feel like even though large language models are really powerful, like eventually we're not going to be talking about them in the ways that we're talking about them now. They're just going to be part of the solution. They'll be part of the application. In the case of your examples, they're going to be part of the workflow and so on. Do you feel like that too, Yuval? Do you feel like, we're excited about this possibility now because, 24 months ago or 36 months ago, we couldn't do the things that we're doing now with large language models. But eventually, this is software. It's very powerful, but it's the problems that need to get solved that are important. Do you agree?
And now, before we dive deeper, I want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about one of our podcast partners. As a listener of this show, I know you're trying to stay on top of all things AI and tech, which is why you have to check out the amazing GeekWire podcast, produced by GeekWire and hosted by Todd Bishop. It's a treasure of insights featuring industry leaders and the latest tech trends that are shaping our world, and the perfect companion podcast to Shift AI. GeekWire Podcast is where technology meets curiosity and covers the world of technology, startups, and geek culture. Expand your tech horizons and join the conversation. Tune into the GeekWire Podcast today, a perfect complement to our own discussions here. Don't miss out. Follow the GeekWire podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Now back to the episode.
Absolutely. I think that's right. I think it's going to be an ingredient, maybe a critical ingredient that is enabling these solutions. But in the end, you're going to have to wrap it with software, with user interface, with other data. And it's really that solution, and just like, I think everybody was talking, oh, I have an iPhone, I have an app for this, 15 years ago. Nobody's talking about it anymore. Okay,
No.
yeah, I can navigate, I can do whatever I want on my phone, but it's no big deal. I think we'll find another way. You're absolutely right on that, Boaz. I want to highlight one other thing that kind of is implied with what Amy mentioned is, there's a lot of talk about how Gen AI is going to take people's jobs away. And to some degree that'll happen, although I think it's going to be more about Gen AI based products will take the mundane work out of what people are doing, and people are going to be able to do more. But equally, I think it's going to make services available to people who couldn't afford, or there were just not enough people to provide them. Like alongside, there's millions of kids in the US that need some mental health support. And, my kids or Boaz, your kids, if they needed that, you'd probably go and shell $100 or $200 an hour for a professional to go help your kid. But that's limited. And if you can have, a service like this that for whatever, $10 a month, to have as many sessions as a kid needs, and any kid in any school can have access to it, that's just a huge extension of what technology can do. And this is not replacing anyone. This is providing a service that there were not enough therapists. And if they were too expensive. And by the way, they might not be available at 11:30 at night to take, a session with your kid. So I think that's something that gets lost in that conversation about the worry about the job. Is it's actually a great equalizer, and it has the potential to provide these human-like or services at some level. I think we're far away from it being the same or better than humans, but it always on, always patient at a fraction of the cost that is possible with people. So I think that kind of gets lost in the whole conversation.
There's one other thing that's hard to quantify about that example that I think is going to be really impactful. And I think about my kids and even myself when I was in school, how many times I was blocked and I needed help, but teacher wasn't available or something like that. And having these educational co-pilots, these mental health co-pilots when I need them, if these kids can get unblocked in real time, I just wonder what the implications are going to be like that for us as a society. And I think it's very, very powerful. So yeah, I really appreciate that example. I want to segue to one other thing that I was just at a founders meetup, and these questions came up, and I think a lot of founders want to know directly from VCs. Given that you guys are getting pitched all the time, can each of you provide a couple tips for founders that are out there, especially now when it's really, really hard to raise money and people are doing 150 meetings to get to a yes? What are some of the things that you would say to founders to give them advice about how to pitch to people like you? You can go first, Amy.
Well, first I would say, always remember you're just sitting across the table from normal people. I mean, at some level, I do think there's a lot of these conversations are very infused with import, right? And people come in feeling like, oh, I gotta deliver. This is my shot, And at some level, yes, and this is the beginning of hopefully a very personal and deep relationship, right? And so, you should approach it, I think, with that backdrop in mind, meaning you're bringing your best self to that meeting. You're bringing an authentic, personality and who you are, because really, what are we screening for? Your idea might change 3 times before you go raise your next round, right? We are looking for the driving force for this individual that's going to see them through the ups and downs and perturbations of this business. Do they have a level of conviction and focus and drive and passion about what they're doing to be able to go take this thing forward? I use the example sometimes of, we've seen a number of entrepreneurs who come in and they have a deck and they haven't really gotten a good rhythm yet in talking through their deck. And sometimes we just say, just put the deck down, shut the computer, like, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what you're trying to do here. Let's talk about why you feel like your product, this solution needs to be in the world, right? And why you're the person to do it. And I'll tell you, some of the best pitches are just people who can tell a story and tell a narrative about why they're doing what they're doing, right? We had one last week of brand new entrepreneurs, first time folks, super passionate life experience that's driving why they're doing this business. They've clearly gone super deep in this space. And it was a story that resonated. It's like, I believe that person has the level of conviction and passion to go forward in that business, right? I'll give you a quick example.
Yeah.
One of our companies, Outlet, the co-founder and CEO is a guy named Kurt Workman. Kurt's wife, as a baby, had a congenital heart defect. And, thankfully her parents went into the room and saw that she wasn't breathing and were able to get her to the hospital. But it stayed in his mind as he was thinking about, companies that he would build that would have impact, about what if her parents hadn't gone in there? Why every parent should not have the information and the knowledge and the access to know what's happening with their kid, right? And that has carried him through ups and downs and all kinds of adventures, right? He has just such a connection and conviction to the mission, right? And I don't think mission-based businesses have to be about, it's just a totally altruistic, focus. Like, you could have a mission-based business that's a B2B focused business and you have a strong conviction about it. But the folks that come in who kind of feel like they needed to come up with an idea, they think they've been quite clever and they have that idea, but it's not really clear like why that's like their reason for being, those conversations tend to just fall a little flat, right? So I'd really encourage entrepreneurs to think about, why am I willing to give up all these things I'm going to have to sacrifice to do this deal for the next 8 to 10 years? This is a long road. Do I feel like I have that in me for this business to go for it, right? Because when all those boxes are checked, it's really clear in the meeting very early on. And when they're not, it's also usually pretty clear. I mean, we don't have a perfect hit rate, and nobody does, but I think that's one thing we've gleaned over time, is that those kinds of intrinsic qualities are really important at the outset of this adventure.
Yeah, I mean, for all the founders that listen to this show, I mean, the drive that it takes to take a company like you guys invest in all the way to IPO, it takes a long time and it takes a lot of conviction. It's hard work. And so figuring that out early is important. Yuval, do you have some thoughts on that as well?
I was just going to just add to what Amy said, which is, it's about creating a connection, with us. It's about telling a story and you don't have to cover, 15 different things that you see sometimes in the slide decks for, entrepreneurs to go raise money. Pick 2 or 3 or 4 things that you really want to talk about and talk well about them. And since we're, Gen AI is kind of the topic for the session, is like, don't say, oh, we're doing Gen AI, therefore we're going to be successful. To the point you made before, Boaz, Gen AI is an important part of the product or the service we're building. And by the way, this is the why now question. We can do it now because of Gen AI, but not like, oh, we're Gen AI, therefore we're going to be successful. Focus on the things that really matter to you and you think are most important for your success, and, do them justice and tell it in a way that it's engaging.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the relationship focus too. Like, we're going to go on a journey together. So, I want to get to know you. I want to understand where you're coming from. And I think that's true for people looking for co-founders too. You kind of want to know where people are at if you're going to spend that much time with them.
Well, and this is what we always tell entrepreneurs, especially if we get past kind of first or second meeting, is you also want to make sure you want to work with us, because it's a two-way relationship. And if that doesn't work for you, then that's fine. We don't need to be your investors. It needs to be a really good investor-founder fit.
Absolutely. So we're going to end with the same question that I ask everybody, but what's cool today is you guys both get to answer. And so the question is, in 2 words, can you describe the future of work, the future of AI, where you see things going, what this future looks like, especially because as VCs, you get to see deals that not a lot of other of us get to see. It's a very interesting perspective. You're kind of early on some of these ideas. And so 2 words. I'll let you go first, Amy. Why don't you do your 2 words, then Yuval, you can do your 2 words, and then we'll go back to Amy for elaboration. So Amy, what are the 2 words?
I think the 2 words I would say for that are never tired. And I think what's becoming more and more evident to us as we've seen applications and use cases with Gen AI is just the scope and scale of what the technology is capable of doing that human beings just as a form of, just limitation cannot, right? And so this idea of, go back to Bright Canary for a moment, if I could know everything that's happening with my kids' social media interaction in a way that provided full context and gave me that, like, in real time, that's just not something that a human can duplicate, right? I mean, it's never tired. It's always on. It's awake when you're not, right? And I think about that with Owlet too. I think about that with other opportunities where we might be equalizing situations which otherwise might not be, right? Language barriers, economic barriers, situations in which that can be democratized, utilizing technology and the power of Gen AI to do that, right? Which I think is a really positive thing for society and culture, right? So it's not, per Yuval's earlier point about kind of displacing workers and the consequences of that. I think there are also some huge kind of equalizing benefits as well. And that comes with, great entrepreneurs coming up with super interesting ideas on how to apply that. But yeah, never tired, I think would be my 2.
I like that. Never tired. That's great. All right, Yuval, it's your turn. How are you going to follow that up?
So my agent is going to tell your agent the answer. But actually, no. But I think about it as actually it's back to the future, meaning, humans have been learning how to use more and more sophisticated tools since fire, and I don't know, probably goes before that. And it's the same with technology. 5 years ago, you couldn't think of recording a podcast where we're not sitting at the same place, right? But we're still recording a podcast. Yes, I'm in my office, you're in your office, Amy's in her office, but it's the same. So, I think we're just going to have more and more powerful tools to do parts of our work, and maybe some of the mundane things we do today will go away. So I think it's just going to be, we're going to have richer tools to do a lot of the same work, and there'll be new things that we couldn't do before for sure. But I think we kind of, it's just a point in the evolution. Maybe there'll be a little bit of an acceleration over the next, God knows, 5 years. I don't know, however long. But that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think the audience is going to definitely check out Bright Canary. They're going to check out Alongside. I want them to go to your website and check out the other portfolio companies. So how do people reach out to you? There's going to be a ton of founders that want to pitch you guys, I'm sure, after this. How do they get in touch with you?
They can email, old school. They can text, they can call. We don't have a lot of pretense about that. As I think we talked about, Boaz, a little bit earlier, we view, what we're doing with our fund and our investment activities. I mean, we function pretty lean, scrappy, and like a startup ourselves, right? And so we love talking to folks. If we can be helpful, whether we're going to be your investor or not, we're happy to do it. It's a small community. Everybody needs a pay it forward moment for sure. So, we're happy to have that initial conversation. And if we can be helpful, we'd love to. So the work that we're doing is really a privilege. It's super inspiring to see people of all backgrounds and stripes go after it and go for those big ideas. And we're pleased to do it and be part of this community. So.
Well, I really, really appreciate having you guys on today, Yuval and Amy. Thank you. I also really appreciate having Trilogy in this community, and you guys as one of the investors that are helping folks out in the early stages. So thank you again for being on the Shift AI podcast. And yeah, I'm excited to have some of your portfolio companies on at some point. They sound amazing.
They'd love to. Thanks, Boaz, so much.
Thank you, Boaz.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Such a pleasure to have Yuval and Amy as our guests on today's episode. Yuval and Amy bring a unique perspective to early stage investing, and I appreciate their human-centric approach to identifying talent and valuable ideas. If you want to stay connected to Yuval and Amy, you can find them on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in how they think about emerging technology, definitely connect with them and keep up with their posts and activities online. I continue to be amazed by the guests we've had on the show, and I'm excited about the ones joining us in the near future. I truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for listening to the episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the Shift AI podcast for more exciting interviews, and to the Augmented AI weekly newsletter for updates on how AI can help you scale your business. The Shift AI podcast is syndicated by GeekWire, and we are grateful to have the show sponsored by Augmented AI. Our theme music was created by Dave Angel.